There are certain seconds, tiny, almost invisible slices of time that come along and crush everything you thought you understood about your life. They don't arrive with warning. They don't tap you on the shoulder. They simply appear sharp and merciless, slicing through your routine like a blade. My moment arrived on a Tuesday, a painfully ordinary Tuesday. It was 12:47 p.m. when I decided to drive home. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock on my office wall, tapping my pen against a stack of contracts I'd spent all morning preparing. I'm a senior accountant at a mid-sized financial firm in Columbus, Ohio. Numbers are my world. Predictable, loyal, incapable of lying. I've built my entire career on structure, on precision, on stability. Funny how the things you rely on most can become the very tools that expose the truth. That morning, I'd rushed out of the house like always. Coffee in a travel mug, a quick goodbye kiss to my wife, Emily, and then straight into the flood of Maple Ridge traffic. I thought everything about my life was steady, safe. My routines were boring to some, but to me they were comforting. Nothing unexpected ever happened in the neighborhood of Maple Ridge, except that day. About halfway through reviewing the quarterly statements, I realized I'd forgotten a set of signed documents in the study at home. A stupid mistake. I cursed under my breath, packed up my things, and told my manager I'd be out for no more than an hour. I thought I'd just drive home, grab the folder, maybe heat up leftovers for lunch, and be back before anyone even noticed. Looking back, it feels ironic how tiny decisions, ones that feel insignificant in the moment, end up being the detonators of your entire life. The drive from downtown Columbus to Maple Ridge took 20 minutes at most. The sky was overcast, that dull Ohio gray that always makes the world feel heavier than it is. I rolled down the window a little and let the cold air slap my face awake. Nothing felt wrong. Not yet. But the second I turned onto Willow Creek Lane, the quiet street where Emily and I had lived for 6 years, my stomach tightened without reason. You know that sudden instinct your body has? The one you can't explain, but you also can't ignore. That's what hit me the moment I saw it. Brian Cooper's truck, parked in my driveway. At first, I slowed down because my brain refused to interpret the scene. Brian never parked in my driveway. Ever. His truck always sat neatly in front of his own house, 2 doors down from ours. It was one of those old blue Ford F-150s, loud engine, rusted on the edges, unmistakable. He was the kind of neighbor who'd wave when mowing the lawn, offer help with heavy boxes, make small talk about football. Nothing remarkable. Nothing alarming, which is what made the sight of his truck in my driveway feel like a splinter in my vision. I pulled up to the curb and just sat there for a few seconds, engine running, staring at the house. Everything looked normal. The maple tree by the porch swayed in the wind. The hanging flower baskets Emily adored, white petunias and purple violas swayed softly. Normal, normal, normal. But the longer I stared, the more wrong everything felt. At first, I told myself what any reasonable man would. Maybe they're discussing something about the HOA. Maybe Brian dropped off a package. Maybe Emily asked for help with something around the house. But none of those explanations settled the heaviness forming at the base of my chest. I got out of the car slowly, almost mechanically, as if my body knew something I didn't yet. The gravel crunched under my shoes. A cardinal screeched somewhere in the distance. The cold bit the back of my neck. Every detail felt too vivid, like my senses were sharpening in preparation for impact. When I opened the front door, the first thing that hit me was the silence. Our house was never silent at that hour. Emily always had something playing. Soft music, a podcast, the TV in the background, anything to make the house feel less empty, as she used to say. But when I stepped into the foyer, I was swallowed by an unnatural stillness. It was thick, heavy, wrong. "Em?" I called out, my voice echoing faintly. No answer. The living room was untouched. The throw blanket still draped over the arm of the couch. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the coffee table, steam long gone. The dining table held the same fruit bowl I'd left in the morning. Spotless kitchen countertops, everything in place. 2 in place. I walked into the kitchen, expecting to hear footsteps upstairs, noise from outside, anything. But nothing responded. It was like the entire house was holding its breath. That's when I noticed something that made my pulse slam against my throat. Emily's shoes weren't by the door. She always left them there, always. But they weren't alone. Brian's work boots were missing too. I felt something warm crawl up my spine. I forced myself to move step by step down the hallway toward the staircase. Halfway there, I heard it. Water. Running. A low, steady rush coming from the master bathroom upstairs. For a moment, I froze. My mind raced through explanations, each one more absurd and desperate than the last. Maybe Emily is showering. Maybe Brian stepped out for something. Maybe. But the truth was already forming in the back of my mind like a shadow taking shape. It was ugly. It was undeniable. And it was pulling me up the stairs whether I wanted to go or not. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the sound of my own breathing. The steps creaked beneath me. Those same steps I'd walked 1,000 times without thinking. But now they felt hostile, foreign, leading me toward a door I suddenly wished didn't exist. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out like a tunnel. The water noise grew louder. And then, something else. Voices. Soft, muffled, intimate. I stopped breathing entirely. The bathroom door was cracked open just an inch. Steam drifted out lazily, the smell of Emily's lavender soap mixing with the warm air. The familiarity of that scent twisted something inside me. For a moment, I stood there frozen, one hand hovering near the doorframe. Part of me begged to turn around, walk back down, pretend I had never come home at all, pretend everything was still fine, still whole, still untouched. But pretending is something you do before you know the truth. Once the truth is at your door, you answer. My fingers closed around the doorknob. Cold metal, cold reality. I pushed the door open, and there they were. Not a misunderstanding, not a misinterpretation, not something that required explanation. My wife, Emily Harris, in the bathtub, my bathtub, her body tangled with Brian Cooper's, like they had built an entire world that didn't include me. The steam curled around them like it was trying to hide their shame. Brian's hand rested on her thigh with a familiarity that made my stomach twist. Her head was thrown back on his shoulder. Their eyes were closed, until they weren't. Emily opened her eyes first. For a split second, she didn't move. Her face shifted, from pleasure to confusion to horror. Then Brian looked up too. "Michael," she whispered, barely audible. But the name didn't reach me. Nothing reached me. It was as if sound had vanished from the world. I wasn't the man I'd been that morning. Not anymore. Because in that single brutal instant, my life split into before and after. People imagine betrayal as an explosion, loud, chaotic, violent. But in reality, it lands in silence. When I stood there in the doorway of my own bathroom, staring at my wife and my neighbor in the intimate tangle of my bathtub, the world didn't erupt. It froze. Everything inside me went completely still, like someone had pulled the plug on my emotions. No rage, no heartbreak, no screaming, only silence. Silence and clarity. Emily and Brian stared at me with the same look prey gives a predator. Wide-eyed, breathless, exposed. The steam drifted around them, the water still running, filling the room with the scent of lavender and something far uglier. They didn't move. Neither did I. My voice, when it finally came, was not my own. "Don't move." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was controlled, cold. The kind of voice you hear from someone who has gone past breaking and into something sharper. Emily's lips parted. "Michael, wait. Not 1 inch." I didn't recognize the tone, but they did. And it terrified them. Brian's hands slipped away from her, as if touching her now was a crime he wasn't sure he wanted to claim anymore. My gaze flicked to the silver key hanging from the hook on the wall, one we kept for privacy. In 3 steps, I crossed the bathroom, grabbed the key, stepped out, and slammed the door shut behind me. The sound echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. Before either of them could react, I turned the key in the lock. Click. That was the second moment of the day that split my life open. Emily's scream came instantly. "Michael, what are you doing? Michael!" Brian banged on the door. "Man, stop, let's talk." But my voice stayed calm, cold enough to frost glass. "You two stay in there and think about what you just destroyed." I walked away. Not because I was weak, but because I finally realized I wasn't. I went into the master bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and felt nothing. Nothing except a strange icy clarity that poured through me like cold water. My eyes drifted to the nightstand. Emily's phone sat there charging. I don't usually go through people's things. I've never believed in snooping. But betrayal changes the rules. Betrayal opens doors you never wanted to even knock on. I reached for it. No passcode. Of course not. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of our marriage. I opened the Messages app, fully expecting a handful of inappropriate texts. Maybe a few weeks worth of flirting, careless boundaries, something like that. I was not prepared for what I found. There were hundreds, 6 months worth of texts between Emily and Brian. 6 months of deception perfectly hidden beneath my own roof. 6 months of, "Good morning, handsome. I miss you already. He has no idea. Take a late lunch? I need you. Samantha's out. Come over now." I love how easy it is to fool him. My chest tightened the further I scrolled, but it wasn't heartbreak. It was realization. They used my house, my schedule, my routines. They studied my life like a blueprint to build their affair safely. Then I found worse. Way worse. "Emily, do you think we should tell him soon? I feel guilty sometimes." Brian, "Not yet. Michael's too stable. He'll fight for everything in the divorce. I need more time to figure out my assets." Emily, "Okay, I trust you." They weren't just sleeping together. They were planning to leave Samantha and me, strategizing how to protect themselves financially, mapping out who would get what. even discussing renting a townhouse in Cleveland to start fresh. Everything about it felt surgical, planned, efficient. A betrayal with spreadsheets. I scrolled back to a message from only 2 days ago. Emily, if things go smoothly, we could be living together by March. Brian, March works. Just keep playing the perfect wife until then. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. And then, slowly, something inside me hardened. This wasn't the destruction of my life. This was the unveiling of what my life truly was. A lie. But no longer a lie I was blind to. That realization didn't break me. It strengthened me. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. My brain already knew the number I needed without scrolling. Samantha Cooper. She had watched my houseplants when we traveled last year. She had baked Emily cookies for her birthday. She had sat at our dining table during winter potlucks, smiling, laughing, trusting both her husband and mine. She deserved the truth as much as I did. I tapped her name. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Her voice was warm, normal, completely unaware her world was about to implode. Samantha, I said, my tone eerie in its steadiness. I need you to come to my house right now. What's wrong? Is Emily okay? I swallowed. My throat felt like broken glass. Emily is alive, I said carefully. But you need to see something. Please. A pause. Fear creeping in. Brian's truck is in your driveway, she said slowly. Is he with her? My silence was enough. I'm on my way. She arrived in less than 10 minutes. In that time, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the locked bathroom door from across the hall. Behind it, I could hear Emily crying, Brian whispering frantic explanations, the occasional thud as they tried to force the door open. My name said over and over, begging, demanding, bargaining. But I stayed still, cold, resolved. Their panic didn't touch me anymore. When the doorbell finally rang, it echoed through the house like a summons. I walked downstairs, gripping Emily's phone tightly. Samantha stood on the porch, pale, shaking, holding her keys so tightly the metal dug into her skin. Where is he? She whispered. Upstairs, I said, with Emily. She inhaled sharply, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Show me, she said. No hesitation, only pain sharpening into courage. We walked inside together. 2 people burned by the same fire. I didn't need to explain anything. I just handed her the phone. She scrolled. Her expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, devastation, fury. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months? While we... Her voice cracked so hard she had to grab the back of the couch to steady herself. He held me last week, she said. He told me he loved me. She looked up at me with hollow eyes. They laughed at us, she said. In their messages, they laughed at us. I know, I said quietly. For a moment, we simply existed there together, side by side, broken in different ways, but broken by the same 2 people. Then Samantha straightened her shoulders. Let's go talk to them. Her tone matched my earlier calm. Not hysterical, not desperate, just done. We climbed the stairs together. 2 betrayed spouses, 2 witnesses to the same wreckage, 2 people who were about to show Emily and Brian that their secret world had collapsed. Brian must have heard our footsteps because he began pounding. Michael, man, please, don't do this. Emily's voice followed, hysterical, cracking. Please, let us explain. Please. It wasn't... My fist hit the door, hard. Not another word. Silence. Then Samantha stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger. Brian, how could you? Samantha? Sam, baby, listen. Don't call me that, she snapped. I felt a flicker of pride in her strength. She pressed her forehead to the door and whispered, You destroyed everything. From the other side, I heard Brian swallow hard. Emily sobbed. But the thing about choices is, they eventually demand their consequences. And in that hallway, with the steam leaking out from under the bathroom door and betrayal hanging in the air, I realized something powerful. I wasn't here to fall apart. I was here to rise. Samantha stood beside me at the top of the stairs, and for a moment neither of us moved. The house felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see who we would become after witnessing the worst moment of our lives. Her hand trembled slightly at her side, but her posture was straight, almost regal, like a woman walking into a fire she never asked for but refused to run from. I felt some unexpected strength rise in me just from being near someone who understood the exact shape of my pain. The muffled voices on the other side of the locked bathroom door grew louder as we approached. Whispers, then frantic arguments, then heavy silence again. They must have heard our footsteps because everything suddenly went still. I could almost imagine them standing there, dripping wet, clutching towels to their bodies, listening to each creak of the hallway floor as if each sound were a verdict. I stopped directly in front of the door. Samantha stood slightly behind me, though not out of fear. More like she was gathering herself, preparing for whatever words or wounds awaited on the other side. I reached out and placed my palm flat against the door, not knocking, not pushing, just grounding myself for a second. It felt cold under my hand, colder than it should have been for a bathroom full of steam. But then again, maybe it wasn't the door that felt cold. Maybe it was me. Brian was the first to speak. His voice cracked through the wood. "Michael, man, please, let us out so we can talk. This is insane." Samantha let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh, but not a humorous one. More like disbelief twisted into something brittle. I didn't open the door. Instead, I spoke with the same calm I'd had since discovering them. A calm so unnatural it scared even me. "You don't get to define what's insane, Brian." Emily's voice followed, thin and trembling. "Michael, please, I'm begging you, just let us talk face to face." I didn't answer her. The sound of her voice didn't reach me the way it used to. It didn't pierce or soften anything. It just existed, like background noise in a place I no longer recognized as home. Samantha stepped forward, placing her hand lightly against my arm, not to stop me, but as if grounding herself. "Brian," she said, and I'd never heard her voice sound like that. Empty and carved out at the same time. "How long?" Her words barely pushed through her throat, and for a moment there was only silence behind the door. Then Brian said, "It's not what you think." I closed my eyes because even I felt insulted by that. Samantha let out another bitter laugh. 6 months. Do you really want to pretend your messages didn't spell out every disgusting detail? The silence that followed was louder than anything he could have said. Emily started crying again. Her sobbing wasn't soft or graceful. It was desperate, the cry of someone who finally realized she'd run out of exits. "Michael, please," she said between gasps. "I made a mistake. I cut her off. You made hundreds of them. One every time you lied. One every time you snuck around. One every time you used my house, my car, my time, my trust." I heard her inhale sharply, as if each word landed like a small blade. "Michael," she whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." Samantha stepped forward before I could speak. Her voice was colder than winter on Lake Erie. "You didn't mean to hurt us," she snapped. "You meant to what? Enjoy yourselves until your new little life was ready? Until you figured out how to protect your precious bank accounts? You think betrayal becomes softer just because you tell yourself it wasn't meant to be cruel?" Another silence. Another confirmation. I felt something inside me shift again. Not anger, just strength. The kind that comes when the foundation has already collapsed and there's nothing left to fear. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the record button. The red light glowed in my hand like a small ember of truth. "Okay," I said, leaning closer to the door. "Let's make something very clear. From this point on, every word you say goes to my lawyer." There was panic instantly. Emily's voice rose. "Michael, no, please." Brian cursed under his breath, the kind of frustrated sound a man makes when he realizes he has run out of lies to hide behind. Samantha folded her arms, her chin lifting slightly. "Perfect," she said. "Let's see if they're as brave when the audience isn't just us." I held the phone steady. "Tell me," I said, "when did this start?" Emily whispered, almost inaudible. "June. 6 months, just like the messages said." "June what?" I pressed, a shaky breath. "June 9th. The date hit Samantha harder than it hit me. I felt her body stiffen beside mine. She whispered, "That was the day of my dad's memorial service." Her voice broke in half. "You told me you were too sick to go. You were with her?" No answer. That silence was its own confession. Samantha shifted backward, her hand covering her mouth as if the truth itself tasted bitter. For a moment she looked like she might collapse, but she forced herself upright again, her chin trembling but high. Brian finally spoke, stumbling over his words. "Sam, please, I didn't think..." She cut him off with a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. "You didn't think." Exactly. For a long moment, none of us moved. I could hear the faint dripping of water hitting the porcelain tub behind the door. I could picture them standing on the tile floor, wrapped in towels, afraid to breathe. I felt no pity. The man I used to be might have. But he wasn't here anymore. I lowered the phone, but I didn't stop the recording. I stepped back, letting the full weight of what was happening settle over me. Samantha watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Some mixture of devastation, fury, and a strange sense of unity. "Michael," she whispered, "what do we do now?" Her voice didn't tremble this time. It was steady, determined, a voice rising from the ashes of everything she thought she knew. I looked at the door once more, not at them, but at the final boundary between the life I had lived and the life I would choose next. "We do exactly what they tried to do to us," I said softly. "We move forward, but not quietly, not blindly, and definitely not alone." Samantha nodded. Slowly at first, then with growing certainty. And in that small nod, something solid formed between us. Not romance, not affection, but a shared understanding so deep it overlapped our pain. Two people locked out of the same burning room, finally realizing they didn't need to run back in. Behind the door, Emily whispered my name again. But this time it didn't pull at me. It didn't anchor me. It didn't hurt. It simply passed through me like a breeze through an open window. Empty, harmless, forgotten. And for the first time since everything began, I exhaled. Not a shaky breath, not a broken one. A real breath. One that belonged to the man I was becoming, not the man they had betrayed. This was the moment I realized I wasn't standing in the ruins of my life. I was standing at the edge of something new, something stronger, something mine. When I finally turned the key in the lock, the click echoed through the hallway like a verdict. I didn't open the door right away. I let the sound settle, let them feel it, let them understand that whatever world they had built behind that door had collapsed. Samantha stood close to me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her chin lifted just enough to show she wasn't afraid anymore. I could feel her holding herself together by sheer force of will. I pushed the door open. Steam spilled out first, warm and thick, carrying the scent of lavender body wash. Mine, not hers. The air rushed past me like it was escaping something awful. And then they stepped forward, or rather, they shuffled forward, blinking against the light of the hallway like creatures dragged out of a cave. Brian was the first to appear, wrapped in one of my bath towels, his hair dripping down his forehead. He didn't look like the confident man who helped neighbors fix their gutters or cracked jokes during barbecues. He looked small, scared, exposed. Emily came next, clutching a towel to her chest, her wet hair clinging to her shoulders, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, the same eyes she once used when asking me to trust her, to forgive her, to believe in her. None of those eyes worked anymore. She reached toward me like muscle memory, like her hand had been trained for years to seek mine. I stepped back before her fingers came close. The rejection hit her instantly. Her shoulders dropped, her hand fell slowly, and she swallowed so hard I saw her throat tighten. "Michael," she whispered, "please, can we talk?" And I said something I didn't expect until the moment it left my mouth. "You don't talk your way out of this." Her lips parted, trembling. Behind her, Brian looked at Samantha with the expression of a man begging for a lifeline. She didn't offer one. Samantha stood with a stillness so sharp it could cut glass. He took a small step toward her. "Sam, please listen to me." She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't waver. "Don't call me that," she said, her voice low, steady. "You lost the right." Brian's face contorted, somewhere between shame and frustration. Emily let out a shaky sob. I didn't reach for her. I didn't comfort her. That version of me died the moment I opened the bathroom door earlier. I started speaking slowly, deliberately. "You're both going to get dressed," I said. "And then you're leaving my house. You will not come back without an officer or a legal escort, you understand?" Emily shook her head, panicked. "Michael, wait, we need to fix this. We can save our marriage, please." I stared at her not with anger but with clarity so deep it felt colder than anything I'd ever known. "You weren't trying to save anything when you were planning how to leave me. Don't pretend this is sudden or complicated. The two of you made months of choices. This is just the moment you got caught." She covered her mouth with her hand and cried harder. Brian shifted uncomfortably, towel slipping slightly, and grabbed it tighter around his waist. For a moment I watched him. Not the man I thought I knew, not the friendly neighbor, not the guy who offered to help carry wood in the winter. Just a man who destroyed his own life with both hands. Samantha stepped forward then, and her voice was colder than mine. "You have 10 minutes, she said to Brian. 10 minutes to get dressed and get out. After that, you're on your own." Brian nodded slowly, defeated. Emily looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find any words that didn't ring false even to her own ears. She walked past me, hugging herself tighter as she moved down the hallway, dripping water onto the wood floors she once insisted we refinish. For a second, I watched her silhouette disappear into the bedroom we shared for 6 years. It didn't hurt the way I expected. It just felt final. Samantha and I stayed in the hallway as they dressed. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't even tense. It was like we were both standing in the aftermath of the same storm, our clothes soaked, our hair tangled, but somehow still standing upright. I glanced at her. She stared at the wall, jaw set, eyes unfocused. I wondered if she was replaying memories the way I was. Birthdays, dinners, movie nights, all the small moments that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. When Emily reappeared, dressed in jeans and a sweater she'd grabbed blindly, her eyes were swollen and red. Brian stepped out behind her, wearing his clothes from earlier, damp hair pushed back, face pale. The two of them looked like children being marched out after being caught stealing. They didn't touch each other now. They didn't look at each other. Traitors rarely stand proud once the lie collapses. Emily tried to speak again. "Michael, please, No." One word. That was all I gave her. She nodded slowly, defeated. I walked them downstairs, each step echoing with the weight of everything left unsaid. When we reached the door, Emily stopped and turned. For a moment, her face softened into something familiar, something almost reminiscent of the woman I once married. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And it was the strangest thing. I felt nothing. Not hate, not love, not grief, nothing. "I don't need your apology," I said. "I needed your loyalty." Samantha inhaled sharply beside me. Brian stared at the floor. Emily's lips trembled again, but she didn't argue. She walked out. Brian followed her. When the door closed behind them, the silence that settled over the house wasn't painful. It was freeing. Samantha exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for hours. She wiped a tear from her cheek, not gently, but with a finality that looked like a decision. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She let out a humorless laugh. "No, but I will be." I nodded. "Yeah, me too." And standing there in the doorway of a home that had been broken just hours before, I finally understood something. I hadn't lost everything. I'd just been given the chance to rebuild without lies. The house felt hollow after Emily and Brian left, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't the emptiness of loss. It was the emptiness that comes right after a storm, when the wind has died and the world is still deciding what pieces will stay standing. I walked through each room slowly, almost cautiously, as if the walls might whisper the truth back at me. Every corner, every picture frame, every shadow looked different. Not because they had changed, but because I had. I found myself standing in the kitchen without remembering how I got there. The counter where Emily and I used to drink coffee together felt foreign. The mug she always used, blue ceramic with a chipped handle, still sat beside the sink. I picked it up and set it inside a cabinet without thinking. Not out of anger, out of instinct. I wanted space, clean space, space that belonged to me again. Samantha had gone back to her house right after they left, and I wondered how she was doing. I pictured her standing in her living room, surrounded by childhood drawings on the fridge and family photos that no longer matched her reality. Part of me wanted to check on her, to make sure she wasn't falling apart alone. But another part of me knew she needed her own silence just as much as I needed mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Please let me explain. I'm begging you." I turned the screen off without reading the rest. I didn't have the strength to hold her words in my hands right now. I didn't have the desire either. I walked upstairs, each step heavy but grounding. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped in the doorway. The bed was still unmade from the morning. The window was cracked open. The room smelled like her. Floral shampoo and something soft I used to find comforting. Now it felt like a room I'd been forced to inherit from a stranger. I opened the closet and stared at her clothes hanging next to mine. Dresses, sweaters, jackets she'd bought on impulse because they felt like new beginnings. I wondered how many times she'd worn one of them while lying to me. The thought didn't sting. It just settled. I grabbed an empty box from the garage and set it on the bed. One by one, I began removing her things from the drawers. Not violently, not chaotically, carefully, precisely. It wasn't an exorcism. It was a reorganization, a reclamation. While I packed, I found an old Polaroid wedged behind a drawer. Emily and me at Lake Erie during our first year of marriage. I stared at the picture for a long moment. We looked happy. We were happy. Or maybe we were just better at pretending back then. I placed the photo in the box too. It didn't belong on my nightstand anymore. The sun had started to set by the time I finished. The house glowed orange through the windows, but the warmth didn't quite touch me. My hands were steady though. My breathing was even. I felt strangely whole. Not fixed, not healed, but solid. Like the pieces inside me had stopped shifting. I decided to call my lawyer. She answered on the second ring. After I explained everything, the messages, the affair, the timeline, there was a long exhale on the other end. "Michael," she said gently, "you're in a strong position, legally and personally." I thanked her. Her confidence felt like the first stable piece of ground I'd stepped on all day. When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the quiet settle around me. I realized I hadn't eaten since morning, but hunger didn't matter. What I felt wasn't physical. It was something deeper, like the gears of my life were shifting into a new configuration. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Samantha, just checking if you're okay." For a moment, I just stared at the message. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I recognized the courage it probably took her to send it. I typed back slowly. "I'm holding up. You." Her reply came almost instantly. "Same. I keep walking from room to room. Nothing feels real. I know the feeling. Yeah, thank you for today. You too." The simplicity of the exchange steadied something inside me. Not comfort, not connection. Just the reminder that someone else understood the exact weight I was carrying. I set my phone down and walked to the bathroom, the one where everything had changed. I turned on the light and stood in the doorway staring at the tub. The steam was long gone. The tiles were still wet. Their towels lay crumpled on the floor like discarded skins. For a moment, anger bubbled up. Not a flash of rage, but a steady burn. I picked up the towels and threw them straight into the trash. Then I cleaned the floor. Every inch. It wasn't about cleanliness, it was about taking back the space they'd contaminated. When I finished, I sat on the closed toilet lid, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together. My reflection in the mirror looked older somehow, not in a worn-out way, in a sharpened way, like someone who had been forced to grow up in a single afternoon. I whispered something I didn't expect to come out of my mouth. I'm still here. Simple, quiet, but true. When I finally left the bathroom, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt empty, yes, but emptiness could be good. Emptiness meant space. Space meant rebuilding. Downstairs, I opened the windows. Let the cold Ohio night air sweep through the rooms. Let it carry out the remnants of steam, the scent of betrayal, the ghosts of the last few hours. As the breeze pushed through the house, I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But I could see the beginning of something new forming at the edges of my mind. And for the first time since everything fell apart, the future didn't terrify me. It called to me. In the weeks that followed, the house transformed without me really planning it. It started slowly, almost unintentionally. I replaced the bedding first, white cotton instead of the navy set Emily picked. Then the curtains, then the photos on the walls, one small change at a time, until one morning I woke up and realized something shocking. The house no longer smelled like her, no longer felt like her, no longer belonged to her. It belonged to me, completely, finally. The divorce process moved quicker than I expected. My lawyer worked like she'd been waiting her whole career for a case this blatant, this clean-cut, this undeniable. The evidence was so overwhelming that Emily didn't bother fighting. She apologized through email, long paragraphs, explanations, justifications, promises of guilt, of self-reflection, of regret. I read none of them. I forwarded everything straight to my lawyer. Some things don't need answers, they just need distance. Samantha and I spoke occasionally, always brief messages, small check-ins. Not emotional ones, just human ones. How are you holding up? Rough day today. Thanks again for being there. We didn't try to fill the silence with anything more than mutual understanding. We didn't need to. We were both learning to walk in new versions of our lives. For me, the healing came unexpectedly one Saturday morning. I woke before sunrise, unable to sleep. The house was still dark, but the kind of quiet that didn't feel heavy anymore, just peaceful. I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee and listened to the wind moving through the bare trees lining Maple Ridge. The horizon glowed faintly orange, and before I realized it, I was smiling. Not because everything was fixed, not because the pain was gone, but because I suddenly understood something I hadn't been able to see while drowning in the chaos. I had survived. And not just survived, I changed. I cleaned out the garage that same day. Not mechanically, but intentionally. I put on old music I hadn't heard in years, rolled up my sleeves and started clearing shelves, sweeping dust, reorganizing tools. Halfway through, I found the guitar I used to play before life got too busy, before marriage became routine, before I forgot who I was outside of being a husband. I hadn't touched it in years. I wiped off the dust, sat on an overturned bucket, and began strumming. My fingers stumbled at first, rusty and unsure. But after a few minutes, the muscle memory returned. The chords found themselves again. The sound echoed through the garage, raw, imperfect, alive. And so was I. That night, after the house settled into its quiet again, I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed and thought about that Tuesday. The Tuesday that split my life in two. The Tuesday that broke everything open. I realized something I never thought I'd admit. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want Emily back. I didn't want revenge on Brian. I didn't want to rewind the past or fix anything. I wanted exactly what I had now. Clarity, peace, and space to grow into the man I should have been all along. Healing didn't come like a wave. It came like sunrise. Slow, quiet, undeniable. Months later, long after the papers were signed and the dust had settled, I ran into Emily at a grocery store in downtown Columbus. She was standing by the apples, staring blankly at the fruit as if waiting for it to choose her. She looked drained, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her own decisions had pressed her inward. When she spotted me, she hesitated, her hand frozen midair. "Michael," she whispered. I waited for the familiar pull of old emotions, pain, anger, nostalgia, but nothing came. Just a calm acceptance that surprised even me. "Emily," I said with a simple nod. She swallowed. "You look good." I didn't return the compliment. Not out of cruelty, out of truth. "Take care of yourself," I told her. And I walked away without looking back. That was the moment I knew I was free. Today, my house is full of things that reflect who I actually am. Unfinished paintings from the art class I finally joined. New furniture chosen only by me. Books I'd forgotten I loved. And a guitar stand in the living room instead of tucked in the garage. The betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. It stripped away the parts of my life that were built on illusion and forced me to rebuild with honesty and intention. I'm not grateful for the pain, but I am grateful for what came after it. Sometimes your world has to fall apart for you to discover that you were living inside the wrong one. And if you're listening to this, wondering whether you're strong enough to walk through the wreckage of your own life, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You're stronger than you think. You're braver than you feel. And sometimes freedom starts the exact moment everything else ends. If my story reminded you of your own strength, then it did its job. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and tell me where you're listening from. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. And I'll see you in the next one.